Well, hey, I am excited to be here tonight. This is so cool. I congratulate you on working so hard to get your real estate license. This is a really, really, really good time to get into the real estate business. And why? Well, because the market goes up and the market goes down. And it appears that we may, and we may not, but we may be kind of peaking out on the rabid sellers market that we've been in. There's been a little bit of slowdown on listings, and it's a good thing. It's a very good thing. I mean, I've always made more money in down markets. I don't know about you, Dan, but it doesn't matter. Up market, down market, buyer's market, seller's market. It's always a realtor's market. And if we have some time, we'll talk a little bit more about that. Tonight, we're going to be going over some questions that will have an impact in your life sometime in the future where you're sitting in front of another computer screen. It's not yours, and you're taking that silly exam. But remember, it's a multiple choice exam. You need to get a good solid C minus 70%. Okay, you can do this, particularly if you come or you watch the replays of these little classes, because these reviews are where the rubber hits the road. It's nice to talk concepts. It's nice to add a little practicality in it. It's nice to, talk about, how all these things fit together. But you're going to be taking a multiple choice exam where you have to choose the best answer out of the four that are given you. And that's what we're practicing tonight. And not only that, but a lot of these questions will bear a striking resemblance to what you may see. Fair enough? So let's get started. Tonight, it's our host is Mr. Dan Naylor, the host with the mostest. He has a much better beard than I do, and he'll be running all the tech stuff. And I'm Rick Roller, the answer man for tonight. So feel free to chime in anytime and ask anything you want. It doesn't even have to be on tonight's material, and we'll try to get those answered for you. Emily, welcome. Okay, so let's get started with number one, right out of the gate here. Okay, which of the following gives constructive notice to third parties of a property sale? Now, what I suggest you do, and I'm going to do it tonight, so to model it, is read the question twice. Which of the following gives constructive notice to third parties of a property sale? Because you need to really understand what they're asking you. And if you kind of speed read through that, sometimes they'll say all the following are wrong except, or which one of these is not right, or, that kind of thing. So I don't want you to miss a question because you misunderstood the question. Well, this one is mainly just a definitional thing. You need to know what constructive notice is. And if you have been working the vocabulary, which is really important for the exam, because there's like 400 words of terms and things that, we don't use, in real life. I mean, the world outside of real estate, I guess we're in real estate world. So that would be real life for us but you're not licensed yet. But anyway, the point is, which of the following gives constructive notice? Now, if you know the definition of constructive notice, it's putting something in the public record. So with that in mind, let's look at our answers. A loan instrument being exercised. You mean it's going to get on one of those treadmills, or no? Barbell. Now, B, commissions being paid to agents. Constructive notice to a third party. Those two don't make sense, do they? Not to a third party. I mean, great. It's great to get paid and get your commission, but that's not really constructive notice. Look at C, legally recording the deed. Ooh, now that one's warm and fuzzy. And look at D, accepting an offer on the property. Well, accepting an offer on the property would give a right to the buyer. And that's okay, but that has nothing to do with constructive notice. In fact, those contracts between buyers and sellers really aren't in the public domain anywhere. I mean, it'd be hard for any third party to even get a look at that contract unless they broke into the broker's office or hacked in or something. So obviously, the answer to this first one is C, legally recording the deed. Legally recording the deed. And when you do have your offer accepted on a property, if you are the buyer, you have a right to buy that, and they can't sell it to someone else. I mean, they could take a backup offer, but you have first dibs, and we call that equitable title, which is another definitional thing. Number 2, please. Any questions about this? Just chime in, chat, unmute, whatever you want to do. Okay, number 2 says, unless there is language in the contract to the contrary, like it's prohibited, the right to possess a property transfers when? When can your buyer move into their new house that they just bought? Look at A, the deed is recorded. Look at B. Oh, I should read it again. Unless there's a language in contract to the contrary, the right to possess a property transfers when? The deed is recorded. The deed is delivered and accepted. That sounds better. Constructive notice is recording assumes that it was delivered and accepted, but this is B, delivered and accepted. That's a pretty good answer. The title insurance is effective. It has nothing to do with anything. I mean, title insurance is like car insurance. I mean, if you wreck your car or someone hits you or whatever, tree falls on it, the title insurance is going to try to make you whole, just like your car insurance tries to make you whole. And don't get confused on that. They don't insure trees hitting your car, but they don't insure trees hitting your house either. That's hazard insurance. Title insurance ensures that you were given bare legal title. The day after closing, well, it could, it might be if the contract specified that. The best answer to this one, because there's nothing to the contrary, is that the deed is delivered and accepted. B, when the deed is delivered and accepted. Okay. Now that could be a physical thing, here, take it, here, it's yours. Okay. But most often people, when they're buying properties, get loans, and lenders, I mean, they want their liens recorded properly, so if they have some rights and have a reasonable expectation of getting their money back plus interest. So that would be delivered and accepted would be a good time for them to move in, unless there's something to the contrary. It's not uncommon right now for buyers to let the seller have a little time after it's closed, and I don't like that, and neither do lenders. I mean, they don't want them staying there 5 or 6 months. I mean, they lent you the money, the buyer, so that the buyer could live there, if I'm speaking to you like a buyer, but they didn't lend it to the seller. The seller paid their loan off and got their cash. They should get out soon. But in order to make the offers more enticing, a lot of times they are, people are making offers in this very competitive market where the seller might be receiving 4 or 5 or 6 offers or more. Then, well, our offer is better because we're going to let you stay a whole month, in the house after you've closed on it. You have your money and you can go close on something else, or maybe haven't even found anything. I don't know. Anyway, that's this one. Number 3. Questions on that? Oh, well, I've seen a lot of people do lease backs. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. It's happening quite a bit now. I think as the market softens up a little bit and it becomes a little bit more even. Right now, it's way overloaded on the seller side. And, the buyers are offering anything just to get something. But as it becomes more in balance, and then it goes the other way, too. So. So people say, well, this is a bad market. No, this is a bad market. Oh boy. Yeah, real estate's fun. But the point is that, you need to change how you're working with how the market changes too. We might talk about that a little bit later when we get into some of the practical stuff. Number 3. Number 3 says a person that conveys ownership of a property to another person using a deed is a person conveys ownership property to another using a deed is a lessor, grantor, mortgagee, assignee. All right, assignee is something like, if you assigned a lease uh, to someone, or you assigned a different type of contract to someone. In this market, some people are putting things under contract and then finding another buyer that they can assign their purchase agreement to, and then they might make a little out of the middle there without ever even closing on the home. There's wholesalers out there that are doing this all the time. Now, our standard Rep C agreement, or Rep C meaning real estate purchase contract agreements, prohibits that, but in most cases, but a lot of times these guys aren't using the real estate purchase contract. They're using a different contract that doesn't address that issue, or it does address it and say, yes, we can assign this agreement to someone else. So that would be an assignee. Okay, but we're talking about conveying ownership, and that's mortgagee. That's really the bank under a mortgage, man. So that's not really title. That's like liens and lending. Lessor, that's a renter. So it's got to be what, gang? It's got to be B, the grantor. The grantee is the receiver. That's the buyer. And the ORs usually are the giveors. And in this case, grantor is the seller, and they're going to give ownership by using a deed. And therefore, they would be a grantor, because the contract calls them a grantor, and it calls the buyer, the purchaser, a grantee. Questions? Number 4, please. Okay, a deed that warrants the buyer, against encumbrances only during the seller's period of ownership is a deed that warrants the buyer, or promises the buyer, against encumbrances. It warrants against encumbrances. It's kind of a promise backed up with action if it's needed. And of course, an encumbrance, it could be anything. It could be a right of way. It could be an easement. It could be an encroachment. Or it could be a lien. Another special type of encumbrances that have to do with money are called liens. So a deed that warrants the buyer against encumbrances, saying there aren't any, okay, except for those I'm revealing to you, only during the seller's period of ownership, is A, special warranty deed, B, executor's deed, C, general warranty deed, or D, quit claim deed. Now, let's look at B, an executor's deed. Executor's deed is signed by an executor of an estate. They've been put in charge of the decedent's, the dead person's property, in order to distribute that according to their will, and they're called an executor. And really, an executor's deed is really kind of like a quitclaim deed, because the executor isn't making any promises. A quitclaim deed, D, is a deed that makes no promises. It's the no promises babe deed, used a lot in divorces, where the couple bought the house together. Maybe they own as joint tenants, some type of joint ownership, and now they're divorcing. And so one of the two is going to give up their interest in the house, maybe in exchange for other property or cash or whatever. But they're, that's all in the divorce decree. It's all negotiated. But what happens is one's going to give up their ownership to the other, or maybe they're going to sell it together and then split the proceeds. But in this case, we're talking about deeding, and a quit claim deed is often used in those types of situations. In other words, we're quitting claim, and they make no promises at all. I'm not even promises we really even got ownership. I mean, when we bought this 8 years ago, okay? So quit claim deed's not it. Executor deed's not it. So that leaves general warranty deed and special warranty deed. Well, the answer to this one is special warranty deed, because special warranty deeds are often used by banks after they foreclose on a property and now they're selling it, to your client, your buyer. And the buyer says, well, why did they have this special addendum in the contract that said they're only going to use a special warranty deed? And you answer, well, that's because that's what banks do, which is, true, but, it doesn't sound real intelligent. You need to become a master of this business, and be able to explain, well, what happens is a bank only wants to promise you that during their ownership, which has only been like 4 months or 2 months or 60 days or whatever it is, they didn't do anything to screw it up. Okay, but they're not promising anything before that. But don't worry too much, because you get what? Title insurance. Title insurance. And if there is a problem, the title insurance company will step in and help you work through those. Just like, you know, auto insurance, hazard insurance would help you fix your house or fix your car. It's a special warranty deed. A general warranty deed is the one that makes the most promises. And as you go through your deed and transfer class, we'll talk a lot about those types of promises, but that's not our topic tonight. Any questions? No questions. Well, you guys are a quiet group. We'll jot something down if if it pops into your head, and we'll be happy to take it at any time, or you can save it to the end. Let's go to number 5, please. Saw a few clouds out today. Well, what's a cloud on a title? Which would be a cloud on a title? Which would be a cloud on a title? Cloud. Okay. A lease on a property. An outstanding lien on the property. Ooh, that's a good one. Multiple owners on title, or multiple previous owners. What would multiple previous owners have to do with anything? You know, well, 10 years ago, this was owned by 3 people. Okay, whatever. Okay, as long as they all signed the deed 10 years ago when they sold it, who cares? You know, how many there were. Multiple owners on a title, still, it doesn't make any difference. You know, multiple could be more than one. I mean, you know, a lot of properties are bought by couples, right? Some are bought by mom and 2 of your sisters and you know, so maybe it's a rental. I don't know, you know, but those last 2, C and D, I don't think so. So a lease on a property, well, some people wouldn't really consider that a cloud. It would definitely be an encumbrance, but it's not necessarily a cloud. Cloud has kind of a negative tint to it. An outstanding lien on the property is what it is. And title insurance companies, this is what they do. This is their stock and trade. What they do is they examine. They have what they call abstractors, people that go into the public record and research this out to make sure that there was proper deeding and transfer all the way down the line. And you might think, well, for how far back? Well, all the way back to Brigham Young. Well, no, not quite that bad, because we passed a law in Utah a few years ago. They only have to go about 21 years back now. And that's not that hard to do, because all the records are in pretty decent shape. You know, if you had to search all the way back to when the pioneers first came here, I mean, we've had some county records that were burnt. And, you know, I mean, it's, you know, there's some counties that are in pretty poor shape, but everything's in great shape the last 21 years. I mean, this is 2020. I mean, this is just going back to the turn of the century. Almost all of you can remember that, you know, the computers were going to fry and all that stuff. Didn't happen. Okay, an outstanding lien in the property would be a cloud. But the title companies, this is why they get involved, because they make sure there aren't any. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. Number 6, which of the following statements is not applicable to a holographic will? See, if you don't know what some of these terms mean, you're going to be doing a lot of guessing. And that's okay. You take your right index finger, you put it on that computer screen, and you rub it up and down between A and D, and you don't really fast. Like, pretty soon one is hot because of friction. Then that's the right answer, 25% of the time. Some of you are some of you aren't that good at math, I could tell. Well, anyway, let's go to number 6. And which of the following statements is not applicable to holographic will? It can convey title. Yeah, it can convey title. It must be in the handwriting of the testator. Ooh, that's true too. It must follow state law, and it must be signed by a witness. Okay, so these first 2, yeah, sure. I mean, a holographic will can, you know, that means it's done in handwriting, and it can convey a property. I mean, you know, the title companies don't like to do it. They're putting their money on the line. You're paying them a premium. And if you're the seller, and ensuring to the buyer that they're getting good title, and then if the borrower's not coming in with all their own money, if they're actually borrowing some to buy this property, which most buyers do, then the buyer pays a premium on title insurance to his bank, because the bank wants to make sure there's good title and that they're in first position. So lots of title insurance buzzing around this deal. But a holograph, and so they were very meticulous about the deeds and the things that they prepare. But a holographic will, could convey title, and if it's a holographic will, it was done in the handwriting of the testator, kind of like the grantor, only he's dead, and it must follow state law. Okay, so correct answer to this one, C, is no, it must be signed by a witness. Okay, you see, I want you to read it twice because you see that word "not" up there, N-O-T, and see how it's all in caps. Well, that's a nice thing the exam, the devious exam writers do. That's how it will appear. And so, if you're paying attention, wait a minute, that means one of these things has nothing to do with the others. I mean, A's right, B's right, and C's right too. You got to follow state law, I mean, we're regulated. And B, it must be signed by a witness. No, it doesn't have to be signed by a witness. Okay, all right. That's why a title company would never use one. I mean, they want a notary and the whole 9 yards. So you got to prove you are who you are and have sufficient ID and all the whole thing. Number 7, please. When a property is abandoned, okay, and no legal owner can be found, okay, the local government takes ownership of the property through. Okay, so here's property. When a property is abandoned, no legal owner can be found. I don't know how you can not find someone these days. The local government takes ownership of the property through, okay, assessment. Assessment's kind of like a fee. It could be what's called a special assessment, where they put in streetlights and they want the property owners to pay for it. Escheat. Now, escheat's the right answer, by the way. But escheat, you see how there's a ES, the S stands for state. And then it says cheat. So you can remember this one easy because that's where the state cheats you out of it. Okay. Of course, you couldn't be found. So in the escheat process, it takes 5 years in Utah. But something else is going to happen. If a property is abandoned and the legal owner is not around, maybe they're not making the taxes either. They're not paying the property tax on it. So what generally happens on these properties, that are abandoned and whatnot, they're not as cheated that much. They can be, but more often than not, what'll happen is it gets sold in the 4th year, the May of after the 4th year, which is before the 5 years for its cheat. So what happens is it hits a tax sale usually before it gets cheated. So, state of Utah does cheat a lot of money in things, but it's mostly safety deposit boxes that haven't been paid for, monies that have been put into a court and was never settled. After 5 years, the court will just turn it over to the state. Inactive brokerage accounts, inactive bank accounts. The state's really hot on those because it takes 5 years, then they can get all that money. But they do make an effort to find the owners. They have that treasure hunt thing that they do in billboard sites and some of the news broadcasts where, hey, you may be owed property, and usually it's something like a utility deposit you put down on a rental or something, and then you never filed for the refund. And they never sent it out to you without you asking for it. After 5 years, they snarf it up, and all those other things I mentioned too. Condemnation is a government process that enforces or puts into application this last one, D, eminent domain. So condemnation is the process of eminent domain. They're linked together. And that is how the government takes your property, but it doesn't have to be abandoned. And they're definitely going to find a legal owner because that's who they enter into the condemnation hearing with and for. And it's a process where, they want to, they expand Redwood Road again. So what happens is they want like 20 feet out of your front yard. If they take too much of your front yard, then they have to buy the whole property, so those are government actions. One is the action, C, and the other is D, the right. An assessment's also another government action, and this cheat is a government action as well. So, there is a tie with those, but the correct answer to this one is when the S, the state, cheats you out of it. Okay. Once again, vocab, vocab, vocab. Okay. Number 7. Oh, that's one we just did. Oh, there's one. Yeah. Okay. We did that one. All right. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, we did that one. We're done with that one. Number 8, title insurance protects against. Does title insurance protects against. Does it protect against someone not making their house payments and therefore they get foreclosed on? Is that what title insurance does? No. Does it protect against subordination clauses? Like a subordination clause might be a clause in a lease, or it could be a clause in a loan that says that, somebody else could take this over, or you could subordinate something that came along later. Predatory lending. No, that's lending laws, not title insurance. Defects in the title. I mean, come on. They even had the word title in there. They might write that a little differently, so they would take title out. I don't know what they would put in, but right now, but obviously the answer to this one is D. Foreclosure, subordination clause. I used to use a lot of subordination clauses when I was buying lots. I would buy a lot and I would talk the owner into carrying some of the money. Let's say the lot was $100,000. Maybe I give him half down, I give him 50 grand, and he agrees to carry the other 50. But when I get the construction loan to build the spec home on it, I would give him another 25,000 out of the spec loan, but he would subordinate, because at the time we did the $50,000 loan that the owner carried, the owner of the lot carried when they sold it to me. Now it's my lot, but he has a lien position in it. But I want to get a construction loan. And so the construction lender wants to be in first position. They want to be number one. So we would put a subordination clause in that $50,000 loan. It wasn't anything sneaky. We explained the whole process to the seller, and oh yeah, sure, that's great. So you'll give me another 25,000, and then when you sell the home, in this great market we're in, I'll make another 25,000. I'll be paid off. Yeah, that's how it works. And so that would be a really good use of a subordination clause. What the clause says is that this loan will become subordinate to any loan that comes along later for the purposes of construction. Sometimes we'd put a limit on it, and the construction loan cannot exceed, $500,000 or something. But that's all in there, and it would be a subordination clause. Now that's all fine and well, but the lender that's giving the construction loan isn't going to go along with that entirely. What they're going to want is, we also put another clause in that clause. It's another few sentences. It says, or anything else the owner needs to do to accomplish the same thing. Because what the insurance, what the bank, the lender, the construction loan lender wants to do is they want that $50,000 lien completely released. Then they put their lien on, so there's no question they're in first position. And then he puts a new $25,000 loan on there after I give him the other 25. Okay, kind of how that works from a practical sense. Well, anyway, let's look at number 9. All right, title insurance. Okay, hey, we've been hitting that a lot today. Title insurance is paid over 30 years with an amortization loan. B, all at once. C, in arrears, which means like rent's paid in arrears. You pay. No, rent's not paid in arrears, right? Rent's paid up front. Come on, rent's paid up front. So hey, it's June, so it's time for you to pay your rent, and so you pay it around the 1st or so. If it was paid in arrears, you'd pay it at the end of the month. Well, come on, no landlord's going to let you live there for the month and then come by and say, "How'd you like it? Can I have my rent now?" What's paid in arrears are mortgage payments. That's what's paid in arrears. Taxes are paid in arrears. When you pay your taxes at the end of the year, you're paying for the year that was. You don't pay in advance. Okay. And title insurance is paid by the lender. I don't think so. They want it, but they want you to pay for it. So the correct answer to this one's not over 30 years. It's not paid in, in arrears, and it's not paid by the lender, guys. It's got to be paid upfront at the closing. B. Okay. It's part of your closing cost. And it's interesting because there's going to be title insurance on the seller side. That's, as I mentioned, was a policy the seller bought for the buyer. And then there's going to be title insurance on the lender side, and that's the policy the borrower bought for his. Well, no, the seller pays for not his lender, he pays for the seller. The seller pays for the buyer, and then the buyer pays for the lender. Okay. All right, cool. Well, I can do one mistake tonight. Okay, let's look at number 10. Okay. Jay signs a lease for a building and sets up his business, and the lease is for 24 months, but 7 months in, the owner of the building dies. It's sad. What happens to Jay's lease in the building? Well, the owner's dead now. I mean, does that cancel the lease? Let's take a look. Jay signs a lease for a building, sets up his business. The lease is for 24 months, but 7 months in, the owner dies. What happens to Jay's lease? A, the lease is automatically expired and the business must move immediately. Dan, we got to get one of those buzzer things. And, that's not true. B, the lease remains in effect. That's we're going to hang on to that one. Okay. The lease goes up for auction and the proceeds goes to a new owner or inheritor. What? Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Dan. The lease will end at the end of 12 months. That's another obnoxious noise there. Okay. All right. So the answer here obviously is the lease needs to stay in effect. I mean, come on, you had 24 months, you had a deal. Okay. In fact, the heirs would just soon you stay there. I mean, now they can split up the income from that property. I mean, why do people buy properties and then rent it out? They want the income. They want the income. It's called an investment. And so the money comes in, and commercial buildings like this, wow, it could be great. People pay by the square foot. Sometimes depending on what kind of business this is, they're even done on a net basis, which, is kind of fun. A net lease are nice to have too. We might talk about that a little later. Let's go to number 11. Q decides to rent a single family home. Okay. The agreement prohibits the tenant from assigning or subletting. Which right in the bundle of rights does the tenant not share in? Okay. Well, tenant does have rights when they rent a property. I mean, Q's our renter here. He decides to rent a single family home, but he's somewhat limited. I mean, he doesn't get, it's like the bundle of rights is like a bunch of pencils, that you can hold in your hand. Okay, we're going to be right the possession, but wait a minute, let's break that in half. You don't, you can only have 6 people in the property, period. It's not like you can move in 3 families. Okay. You have the right, to quiet enjoyment. Oh, let's break off a little bit of that, because I could give you notice and come by and inspect the property, at a reasonable time with proper notice. So you're giving the renter some rights, but usually it prohibits the tenant from assigning or subletting. Okay. Which is good grief. I mean, I had a property manager friend of mine up in Boise one time that rented out a property for a friend of his. He was his client, and he would rent it out, and he rented out. This nice young man came, he had a suit on, his hair was all neat and tidy, and he looked like a returned missionary or something. Well, anyway, so he drives by about a week or so after he rented it to him, and there was a bunch of motorcycles parked over the front lawn. The local motorcycle gang had moved in, and as he drove by, one guy is being thrown out the front picture window. Yeah, well, that kid drew the short straw, so he had to get a haircut and a DI suit and go in there and rent the property. So needless to say, it took him about 2 months to get them out of there, and they tore the crap out of that property. And he lost the account, obviously. His friend wasn't his friend anymore after that. But anyway, so which right in the bundle of rights does the tenant not share in? What about disposition? Well, no, you can't sublet, or you can't assign your lease, so you can't push that over to somebody else. Quiet enjoyment, yeah, you get that. Use of control, sure, to a certain degree. We said that specifically. And right of possession, all 3 of those make sense. You don't get complete of those, but you do get a renter's share of those. So obviously the correct answer to this one is D, the right to dispose of your lease. I mean, to give it to someone else, sell it. You know, well, we won't get into that. Let's look at number 12. Okay, a lease that automatically renews at the end of each period is called. A lease that automatically renews at the end of each period is called. All right. A, tenancy at sufferance. No, someone's suffering here. That's why it's sufferance. And usually it's the landlord. it's a holdover tenant, or it's a tenant that is not abiding by their agreement. Okay. It could be either one or both those. Okay. Tenancy at will, that's like staying in a hotel. It doesn't renew. I mean, in fact, you could say, I'm going to be here for the whole week. And it's, oh, well, thank you, Mr. Roller. That'll be great to have you. And then I come down the next morning and check out. Oh, look, I got a call from home. I got to get home. I got some emergency things happening there. Now, also, the president or vice president might be coming to town, and they want to clear that whole floor. So they say, well, Mr. Roller, sorry, you can't stay the rest of the week because we have another person that's coming in is taking the whole floor. So that's tenancy at will. It's at the will of either party, actually. A periodic tenancy. Ooh, that's a good one. Okay, because it automatically renews. It's like month to month. And tenancy by the entireties. Tenancy by the entireties really isn't have much to do with the lease. It's actually a type of ownership that's legal in Utah. It's kind of like joint tenants. Well, it is like joint tenants, exactly. It is joint tenancy for married people. You have to be legally and lawfully married. And then you can be tenancy by the entirety. So it really doesn't have anything to do with leases. So obviously the correct answer for number 12 is periodic tenancy, from period to period. Okay, cool. How are you guys doing? Are you getting these? I hope so, because this is where the rubber hits the road. It'll be real quiet in that room. And by the way, there'll be a lot of other people in there. They're not necessarily getting into real estate. They test on a lot of things. The Pearson VUE test for nurses licenses. It also tests for pilots licenses. I mean, you don't know what people are doing in there. So don't say, oh my gosh, look at all this competition. They're probably not even testing real estate. They could be testing mortgage. All right, let's go to 13. Which would a non-disturbance clause what would a non-disturbance clause in lease protect a tenant from? Non-disturbance clause. Which would a non-disturbance clause in a lease protect a tenant from? Loud customers in the parking lot. No. How about B, losing the lease due to foreclosure on the property? That's the right answer, guys. C, solicitors approaching a tenant or their employees. Hi, would you like to buy some apples or perfume or whatever? D, landlord's inspection of the property. That wouldn't, none of those work. The only thing that works is losing the lease due to foreclosure. Now, think about this. I mean, if you're thinking about a fourplex or a duplex or something, this may not come to mind very easily, or maybe it's not the most best illustration of this, but think of a full floor rental on an office space or a medical space, and the tenants have invested 50 grand of their own money to build out that space. Particularly for the doctors, they had to move all their equipment in, special wiring, plumbing in the walls for their oxygen tanks or whatever. And so if the landlord doesn't pay the mortgage, then the property will be foreclosed on, and they don't want to be kicked out of their building. I mean, they want to be able to stay there. So if you're a tenant, you're going to want to have a non-disturbance clause in your lease, particularly if you're putting a lot of your own money into it. However, if you have a good lawyer, that's working for you as a tenant, they're going to, or maybe even a good realtor, they're going to advise you to take that to the landlord's lender and have them sign an agreement saying they agree to abide by that. Because this lease that you're entering into with the landlord is just agreement between you and the landlord. I mean, you and, you're the renter and then the landlord. Okay. What you're worried about here is the landlord won't make the payments and you'll get kicked out of the building and you'll lose all your investment. Or maybe you've got the whole building. Maybe it's a little restaurant space or something, and you really tricked that out and made it really cute and nice, and it was hard to find. You don't want to lose it. So you want the bank, the landlord's bank, to sign off on that. Commercial real estate is something that's really exciting, and it's another thing. It's booming in the valley, and it's something that you really ought to take a look at if you want to. 14, please. Okay, what happens on number 14 is that S was 3 years into a 5-year lease and wanted to move elsewhere. Okay, 3 years. Hey, they have a 5-year commitment, but they want to cut out early. Okay. T is willing to sublet the property, which is true. S was 3 years in a 5-year lease, move out, and T wants to sublet. Okay, which is true. Okay. All right. So S was being nice. They found someone else to take over their obligation. Now, whether their current lease allows them to sublet or not sublet is not the issue here. They have found a tenant and they're willing to sublet the property, but that's not this question. What this question is, how is this set up? A, T pays rent directly to the owner. No, it was a sublet. So T's going to pay the rent to the former tenant. S has no further liability for rents or damages. Oh, no. See, because S only subletted. S is still hung on that lease. I mean, obviously he wants to get a good subletter who's going to tear the property up and is going to make the payments, because he's still on the hook for all that stuff. C, S could increase the rent and make a profit. Yes, absolutely. Sometimes you do a master lease of a building and then you sublet it out. I mean, of course, obviously you need to have the right contracts to do all this. But, I found a building one time that had been sitting around for a long time, had, for rent side hanging by one piece of duct tape. Obviously, there were weeds everywhere. And I contacted the owner and said, hey, would you master lease that to me? Well, what do you mean? Will you lease the whole building to me for this amount of money? Well, it's better what I'm getting now, and of course, the lease I had allowed me to sublet. So in no time I had, I wouldn't have asked him if I didn't have other tenants ready to go. So I cleaned up the property real cute, did some painting, took out the weeds, put 2 other tenants in, and I made $1,500 a month out of the deal, which, back in those days was quite a bit of money. Well, $1,500 a month, still $1,500 a month, except it only buys a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment. Okay, S could increase the rent, make a profit. Yes, you definitely could. It has to be in the agreement, though. Yes, Dan.
Quick question in the chat from Lindy. She says, is this a commercial or a residential in this question, or both?
Well, it could be, it could be a crappy fourplex that they're not taking care of. You slap some paint on it. But the key here is that whether it's residential or whether it is commercial, guys, the agreement must be clear with the current landlord that you have the right to sublet. Okay. Now, T's the only one that could be liable for damage to the property. No, I mean, you're still in that mix, and so you're right in there. Did you have something else you wanted to illustrate with that question, Dan? No.
This question?
Okay, let's go to number 15, please. Another way to get out of a lease is just go to the landlord and offer him a cash settlement. No, I know I owe you 2 years worth of rent, but it's just not going to happen. We had a lease on a property that I was representing in property management, and also sold it on a restaurant in, it was a major brand. I mean, it was an old brand. It was one of the pie places around town, but anyway, they just went bankrupt. What are we going to do? They bankrupted their obligation on the lease. So, if that tenant would have come to us and said, well, look, we have another 3 years on our lease, but we can't make the payments, but we will give you a cash settlement of this much money, we would have taken it, because we knew the next step was bankruptcy anyway. Okay, then I sold for 1.7 million. So they still, the landlords were still happy. 15. What 15? Are we on 50? Yeah, a tenant's obvious. Okay, a tenant obtains a lease with a low base rent. But the catch is they must also pay the property insurance, property taxes, and other building expenses. They have what kind of lease? Percentage lease. Well, a percentage lease is like you see in malls. Sometimes restaurants have percentage leases where you pay a base rent and then you pay a certain amount of money of your sales, your proceeds. And the landlord has the right to come in and audit your sales tax returns and, that you send into the state to make sure you aren't cheating them, and other ways of making sure that they're getting their fair share of your gross sales. That's not what we're talking about here. Okay, we're talking about a different type of lease. A gross lease is where the landlord pays all the expenses. Well, that's not what's happening here either. Because what's happening here is there's the catch is the tenant pays all those expenses. So this is a net lease. See, it is a net lease. And you might be thinking, that's strange. Who would do that? Well, restaurants many times are done on a net lease. Warehousing space is generally done on a net lease. So it's not your typical duplex or fourplex. Usually that's what we call a modified gross, where the tenant pays some things and you pay some things. Like, for instance, the tenant may pay for some of the building expenses, like the utilities, and landlord may pay the water bill, but the tenant pays for mowing your lawn or whatever you agree to. But a net lease is where all the money that goes to the landlord is net. Landlord doesn't have any expenses to pay. Tenant pays the taxes. Tenant pays the insurance, and a tenant pays all the building expenses and maintenance and whatnot. So if the water heater went out on that warehouse and the tenant's under a net lease, he might call the landlord and say, hey, the water heater burst and there's water all over the floor. Will you put me in a new water heater? And you say, well, no, remember, you're on a net lease. Now, Home Depot's got a pretty good sale going on this weekend. Memorial Day's coming up. You might want to rip down there and get one. Make sure you get at least a 50-gallon, because it says you have to replace it. And our lease says you have to replace, similar to what's in there. And by the way, it's a high recovery unit as well. In fact, just take a picture of it and get my okay before you buy it and install it. And let me know how that works out. Thanks. That's a net lease. It's nice to have net lease businesses. Buildings that you rent out to businesses. As long as they pay the rent, it's fantastic. People with a lot of money, a lot of them have invested in distribution centers. And, I have one broker I know that was doing Amazon distribution centers, and had a lot of Hollywood celebrities. You make $30 million on on a movie. What are you going to do with it? There's only so many Rolls Royces you can buy. So, you might want one place to stick it, and that might be an Amazon distribution center. The problem is, word on the street is Amazon's trying to get out of 30 to 50 million square feet of space. I hope it's not one of his centers. Okay, number 16. Amazon's got a problem, because gas affects them too, doesn't it? In California, it's $7.25 in the San Francisco area. So they're trying to talk people into saying, well, we'll take it to this locker center, over at the 7-Eleven, you can pick it up there. I said, well, I ordered it. I like it delivered to my door. So, oh man, times are changing. And it's exciting, because when things change, people need realtors. Sellers don't, think they need a realtor right now, which is silly. They need a realtor more than ever. To manage everything and get all this. But I could just put up my for sale by sign, sell it myself. Yeah. Well, whatever. But in a slower market, sellers really, realize, I put up a for sale by owner, no one even called. The only people that called were realtors. 16, ground lease can apply to what type of properties? Vacant land only, residential property only. It's a ground lease. So commercial property. Well, residential or commercial, I don't know. In both residential and commercial. Well, if they're going to have residential, commercial, and both, see, those three are kind of tied together. Guys, it's got to be vacant land, and that's what it is, right? It is vacant. No, it's both residential and commercial. It doesn't have to be vacant land only, okay? It could be, there could be a building on it. for example, on an example of a residential ground lease, there's a lot of them done in Hawaii, you know, in the Big Island and several of the other islands where the people that own the land don't want to sell it. I mean, come on, there's only so much island. I mean, I'm stupid to sell it. You know, I want to keep it, but I'll let you build a house on it, but I'll ground lease it to you. And that would be an example of a residential ground lease. Most McDonald's are on a ground lease. And the McDonald Corporation owns the dirt. You know, McDonald's is one of the biggest property owners in the world. You know, they own the dirt, and then they just, you know, they sometimes even own the building, but they own the dirt for sure, but they rent out the dirt to the operator who could build the building, and then they have all kinds of, I don't know if you've noticed around here, but our McDonald's seems to, you know, they seem to get remodeled every 2.5 years. It's just crazy. And they kick in a little bit to help on that, but you know, they sell a lot of product. Okay, number 17. Okay, an owner of a fourplex plans to lease the individual units. Well, I guess so, unless you have a real big family you have to house. But wants to have some control over who lives there. Which of these options can they do? Only one person per bedroom. What is a bedroom anyway? Some cultures, they roll out sleeping mats and they all, you know, they sleep in the living room. Is that a bedroom then? Limit the total occupants to a reasonable number. And that's the correct answer, by the way. One, you know, usually what will happen here is, you know, fair housing laws and whatnot will go by the county health department, what they think is standard or what they think is optimal. And that's in our county, it's 2 people per bedroom. But I think with the high cost of rentals right now, we're seeing 3 and 4 people per bedroom, a couple bunk bed sets in some of these larger families. Allow no children on the premises. No, that's called discrimination on familial status. Rent only to natural born citizens. Okay, can't do that either. No Irish need apply. No, can't do that. Can't discriminate against national origin. You know, if you are a citizen that went through the test, or a person that went through all the testing to become a citizen, and you know, whether you're a citizen or not, whatever. That's a bad answer. All right, so guys, the right answer is limit the occupants to a reasonable number. Okay, questions on anything? Which stock's going up tomorrow? Lindy, you have a question? Whitney, any of the our other people that are watching live? Anybody have a question? Okay, practical note. Oh, yeah, here's one. From everyone, I forgot it. Should have written it down. That's okay. Hey, you know, I have a phone number. It's 801-556-8000. That's 556-8000. Okay, that's my number, 801-566-8000. And you're welcome to call day or night, doesn't matter.
Whitney does have a question.
Who has a question?
It's in the chat.
How long do we have to take the test? Hours and hours. It's like 4 hours now, isn't it, Dan?
Yeah, 4 hours to take the test, and there's about 130 questions total.
Yeah, but it's in 2 parts. There's national, and then there's state. And when you finish the national, then you log out, and then you just do the state. So you can't go back to the national. So, but plenty of time, especially if you know the answers. And as you can see tonight, you know, vocab is really, really important. But on that number, while you're in the exam, that's not a good time to call, by the way. Although I could be the most help to you then, but you know, can't do that. They take your phone away, you know, can't do that. Do we find out the same day if we pass? Yes. When you leave the exam center, they tell you, congratulations, you passed. They don't tell you your score. The only way you're going to get your score is to flunk. Sorry, you flunked, you got a 69. Oh, if you'd only known one more thing, you know, whatever. Guys, over prepare. We have a tremendous pass rate at our school. It is absolutely tremendous. You know, it's really high. There's been some months everybody passes. And there's some months we lose one or two. You know, really the people that took the longest time to take their, you know, the schooling, like you started 2 years ago or a year ago or 9 months ago, and now you're taking your last class. Yeah, but see, you only load this stuff up in short-term memory. So get through the question, get through the material, get through the classes, get through the reviews, you know, call me, call Dan if you need some tutoring or have questions about something. Gosh, in the last couple of months, I've tutored 2 students one-on-one, you know, said, I just don't get this. You know, one of them, English was her second language. We sat down one Saturday and went through everything and went in, no problem. You know, I mean, you know, and no charge. Look, we want to maintain our high pass rate. So we'll do anything we can to help you get through this test. And we have an excellent pass rate at the school. You are at the right school. And we appreciate you. And send all your friends to us, okay? Anyway, thanks for being here with us tonight. Any other questions? It's your last chance for tonight. Well, we appreciate you. And when you get out of there, you're also obligated to sell one of Dan's and one of my listings. It's in the contract, it was in the fine print. You probably didn't notice that.
Right.
Thanks a lot. See you guys out there.
Okay, thanks everyone. Thank you, Rick. Appreciate it.